In this video I'm quickly going to show you how to change out a battery on an Alfa Romeo Giulietta 2 litre diesel. So starting off literally just with changing the battery, because this was the original battery that's in the car. It's a 2014 Alfa Giulietta, so the battery's never been changed. So when I was actually changing the battery here, I had to actually get a little bit of help just to go through the process of changing the battery out. So as you can see here, the first thing to do is to take the connector off the negative terminal. There's two connectors on the Giulietta for the negative terminal, and you have to take the top one off before you can start to work with any of the other terminals. Plus you have a strap as well, but because it hadn't been taken out, it actually had seized and was a little bit rusted, so I had to spray some lubricant on it to try and allow it to free itself, so that we could actually get a couple of wrenches on it to be able to loosen it. So it took a bit of time kind of faffing around trying to figure it out and trying to make sure that we actually had the right connectors for the ratchet so that we could actually get the bolts off. It used 10mm or 11mm sockets for the bolts, and primarily there's only like 3 bolts. There's one for the positive terminal, there's then one for the negative terminal, and then the strap itself actually has a slightly bigger socket that's needed compared to the other two. I think that was like a 12 or 13. But if you have a number of sockets lying around, just try them all out until you get one that actually fits. So when you do, you have to take it, when you get it all loosened up, you take it off, and then that frees up pretty much the most of the case of the battery. So then it's just a case of just disconnecting the terminals then. So that's why I had to get a bit of help, because I was holding the camera as to record it. Again, it was just even more for my own preference as well, because this car is my daily driver, and I wanted to make sure that I can actually have some sort of process to go back to if I actually needed to change the battery out again. Because compared to like most other cars, even though it is relatively simple, it's still a bit fiddly to change the battery out in these cars compared to like say older cars. As a lot of the older cars I would have had over the years, it would have been a lot more simpler to actually change the batteries out without little to no hassle. So it's just making sure getting the right sockets for the likes of the terminals to be able to take the terminals out. And again, because they've been sitting there for a while, and they would probably have never been taken out from when the battery was actually taken out, or the first battery within the car. So just had to play around with it and just fiddle around with it. And again, like, the space is quite tight in the engine bay to take it out, because the battery was completely flat, which is the reason why I actually had to change it. And due to the ongoing kind of pandemic, the car hadn't really been driven as much over the last few months, so gradually the battery, even though it was weak enough, it just eventually just died out. So I had no choice but to replace it with a brand new battery. The one thing to note is with this battery as well is I had to go into a local parts store and make sure that I get the right type of battery for this car, because this Alfa Giulietta uses stop-start technology, and you need to make sure that you get the right type of battery that actually works with that technology. If not, they can actually screw up the whole kind of computer system on the car. So I made sure just to double check inside the motor shop when I was getting the parts that I needed to make sure that I was getting the right one. I got them to double check just to make sure. So when you put the battery back in, again, you're just putting the terminals back on. So putting it back together is pretty much the reverse of how you actually took it apart originally. It can be a little bit fiddly, in fairness, trying to figure out where everything goes, but just keep trying and eventually then you'll figure it out. So, because even like saying, I was getting a little bit of help to try and put it back together, so I was kind of having to show pretty much what was going on, because again, I was holding my phone as well, trying to record as well while trying to help. So it was, even for me, it was a learning process as well, because I was actually helping out and watching what I was doing, and even for my dad that I was getting to help me with it, it was also a learning experience for him as well, because he'd never changed a battery on an Alfa Giulietta before either. So it's definitely a good experience, and I just thought I'd actually make this video just to kind of show you how to actually do it and put it together. We did have a little bit of a problem when we were putting the positive terminal on. The washer at the back where the nut is, it was just rounding out and it actually wouldn't sit right. So I actually had, even though it's not ideal, but I had to get a screwdriver just into the back of the socket itself, as you can see here, just to hold it in place so that the bolt would actually catch. Once I got that, then it was the case, then you could tighten it out, and then it was fine, it was good to go. And then it was just a case of tightening up the rest of the terminals. as you can see here. So once that was done, then you're pretty much good to go. It's just a case of just making sure everything was actually working and making sure everything was a good fit before we started the engine. So once everything had been tightened up and all the terminals had been tightened up, before I put the strap on, I decided to actually go and try and start the car just to make sure that the battery is working before we tightened everything up, because the strap is pretty straightforward to put back together onto the car. So as you can see here, you just see the lights on the dash when the engine starts. So it was just to make sure all the other parts were actually tightened up, and then it's just a case of putting the strap back on, which you'll see now in a second. So as you can see from the likes of the warning lights and some of the errors that were coming up on the dash, you'll see that I also have to fix up the likes of the connector part for the strap, because it's actually rusting out. So I'll actually have to sand it down and repaint it. I'll have to do that at some stage, so I might do that actually for another video just to show you how to tidy that up, because again, it's another thing that needs to be done. But with the errors on the dashboard, the next thing to actually, what I had to do was I actually had to go and get the computer reset. So I had to take it down to a garage then the next day, because at this stage when I was changing the battery out, all the garages had been closed. So once I changed the battery out, like, the car would start even with all the lights and stuff on the dash, which was fine. But it was a case of that I actually had to get the computer reset to reset all the fault codes and error codes and so forth. Now once I'd actually done that, the car actually has been running smooth ever since, so I haven't had any issues. So in total, for the cost of the battery, because I live in Ireland, so the cost of the battery itself was €120. And again, this is because I needed to get one that uses the stop-start technology. That's one thing you just do have to make sure is when you're changing a battery in one of these cars, always ask in the motor shop and tell them that your car uses stop-start, because the chances are if you use the wrong one, it can mess up the whole computer system. But more often than not, the guys in the shops will usually ask you anyway, so you just have to know that, and if it is, then it's a case of making sure you're getting the right one. And then I had to go and get the computer fault codes reset, because I didn't have access to any tools that allows you to keep power running to the terminal so that the battery doesn't reset. So I had to take it to a garage, which again cost another €50 to have that done. So all in all, the battery itself was €125, and then it was €50 then to get the computer reset so that the car would be fully drivable. Now it is expensive, but at least I know that the car is maintained now and that it will actually run efficiently now for quite a while. So it's just something to be aware of, that when you are changing the battery in one of these cars, that it can be quite expensive, especially if you don't have much knowledge or background in terms of like changing the batteries or just working with cars in general. And if you're getting other garages and so forth to do it, it will actually cost you a bit of money. So just take into account that it actually is going to cost you to be able to do this job. So I hope you found this video to be helpful, and now you have an idea of actually how to change out a battery in an Alfa Romeo Giulietta 2-litre diesel. So if you have found it useful, make sure to leave a like on the video and also subscribe to the channel, as I will be putting together more videos just doing other odd jobs on the car and even some of the other cars that I actually have. So see what you all think of them, so make sure to keep an eye out for that. So I will see you all in the next video.